All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So welcome, my name is Britt, and I'm very excited to present our webinar today for one continuing education credit. And our topic today is how to promote wellness through nutrition, strategies for dining leaders. I'm super pleased to present our expert, Maggie Roche. Maggie is the founder of Roche Dietitians and nationally recognized leader in nutrition consulting. So Maggie's mission is really to educate and empower those who nourish others. She believes that food is medicine, and she uses evidence-based standards to promote health and wellness through nutrition, especially for the older adult. So she guides organizations and individuals through the complexities of the male nutrition therapy and the business of serving food in healthcare. So most recently, Maggie has worked extensively with the International Dysphagia Diet Standardization Initiative, IDSI, and she works with manufacturers on product development and testing. But she has created an IDSI training program that truly simplify implementation, improve food quality, and promote safety. And she has trained thousands on this IDSI framework and testing methods. So she is a registered dietitian with a master's degree in clinical nutrition. She has advanced credentials as a board certified specialist in gerontological nutrition, and is distinguished as a fellow of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So before we begin, before I turn it over to Maggie, please submit your questions via the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and we're going to do our very best to answer all your questions after the presentation. So now, without further ado, may I present Ms. Maggie Roche.
Thank you, Britt. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Let's get started with our learning objectives. We've got 4 of them. First, we're going to identify the key components that dining contributes to a wellness program. We're also going to list the important ways a dining wellness program can be evidence-based. We'll distinguish between traditional senior living menus and senior living menus that promote wellness. And we'll describe how to select nutritional standards that reflect residents' needs and preferences. I do want to cover for you, though, because I know you all want to know this, how are you going to get your CEU? Dietary managers and registered dietitians are eligible to get 1 hour of continuing education credit. We will email you a link so you can download your certificates, and look for an email from rd@rochedietitians.com. It's going to come to you on Monday. Check your spam folder too, because sometimes it ends up going there. But if you run into any trouble, just let us know. All right, we're going to start out with a poll. We're going to ask you 2 questions. Please answer both of them. The first question is true or false. Older adults need to focus exclusively on not losing weight, and a healthy eating pattern is not that important. So it's all about the weight for the older adults and not so much what they eat. True or false? And number 2, does your organization have a wellness program? Yes or no? 2 simple questions, but we're dying to know the answer. So we'll give you a few seconds to fill that out. And then Matt is going to give us the results after he's given everybody a chance to vote. False. Okay, good. So we're all on the same page. Yes, we do focus on weight maintenance with older adults, but it does matter what they eat. You know, nutrition is very powerful, and it can affect the quality of life. So we got that right. And does your organization have a wellness program? Yes. No. 64%. Yes. 36%. All right. Very interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. Thank you.
Perfect. So Maggie, what do we mean by wellness in the context of senior living?
All right. Let's talk about that. I'm going to show you a model. See if I can get that to move. Okay. There's several models of wellness, but I'm going to show you this one. This is the International Council on Active Aging's 7 dimensions of wellness. Sometimes you see 6 pillars, 7 pillars, dimensions, whatever. It falls kind of in these categories. And wellness is derived, this is their definition, the International Council of Active Aging's definition is, wellness is derived from our ability to understand, accept, and act upon our capacity to lead a purpose-filled and engaged life. In doing so, we can embrace our potential to pursue and optimize life's possibilities. Pretty deep. And how you do that is through these 7 pillars: physical, social, spiritual, vocational, emotional, environmental, and intellectual. So let's break those down and take a look at them individually, and how it applies to an older adult or an aging adult. First is physical wellness. We're very familiar with that. We nourish people, we feed people, and there is a medical nutrition therapy aspect to what we do. So medical care, nutrition, fitness, that all fits under the physical realm. The social wellness involves or includes enhancing personal relationships and building a stronger community. And boy, we learned a lot about social and or the lack thereof social interaction during COVID, didn't we? And how very important it is for our elders, but for all of us. So we don't really need to do much more explanation besides, we've lived this. Spiritual wellness is related to a person's search for the meaning and purpose of human existence. It may be religious, but it may not be. A person achieves spiritual wellness when actions become consistent with beliefs and values. So it's a spiritual experience to say, yes, I'm living in a way that is meaningful to me, that I value, that is consistent with my beliefs. Oops, I don't know how that happened. Hold on a second. I got a mouse that's very active. Okay. Intellectual wellness recognizes mental activity and creativity. So creativity falls under here with a focus on problem solving, creating, and learning. Now, this one, sometimes people think, well, this doesn't apply to older folks, vocational wellness, but it doesn't necessarily mean your job. Vocational wellness is work that uses a person's skills while providing personal satisfaction. So many people know folks who can work a job for 40 years and it was a drudge and it kills them. And we know people who would work their job for free because they love it so much. So vocational wellness is being in that sweet spot of using the skills that you have in a way that's very satisfying to you as an individual. Emotional wellness, many of us are very familiar with that being an important part of wellness, but it relates to one's feelings and includes the degree to which a person feels positively and enthusiastically about life. And then lastly, now this pillar is not always included in wellness pillars, and this is environmental wellness, but it's really becoming much more on the forefront of folks' minds in terms of being part of wellness for all of us. And that includes a healthy relationship with both your natural and man-made environment. And we're seeing so much of this ourselves in the senior living space with gardens, and even indoor planting, biophilic design, etc.
Yeah. So Maggie, does a person have to master all the dimensions in order to achieve wellness?
No. And you ask a question that other people have asked, Britt. There was a study done in 2012 that looked at 6 dimensions of wellness and cognition in adults. And they found that wellness in one or more of the dimensions may protect cognitive aging. And we would suspect that, your brain's better, your thinking's better when you're well in one of these dimensions. But it was interesting, they also found that high wellness in one dimension protected cognition by compensating for low wellness in another dimension. And we've all experienced this. I randomly selected these items that I put on the scale. So in this situation, a person may be weak and frail, can't really do much, doesn't have much vocational output, can't really use their mind. But they have a high level of wellness because environmentally, spiritually, emotionally, and socially, they're doing well. In this example, I hope it rang a bell for a few of you. This is maybe somebody with a moderate to advanced sense of dementia. That person could have a good sense of wellness for them. even though intellectually or vocationally or physically, they're not doing very well. So it begs the question of how do we think about wellness? And yes, it's interconnected. All of these pillars are interconnected. Another way to think of it, and for those of us who are more clinically based or just formally trained, sometimes this model is a little bit harder for us to wrap our heads around. So I found this helpful too. Think of it in terms of positive aging and the factors, these independent factors that really need to be in place for positive or healthy aging. Health, having some type of physical health, cognition, activity, affect or mood, and fitness. So these are all areas that all of us really can focus on as we move towards aging, as we age, and look for wellness in that realm. So I think this is a good way to think about it. And I love this quote because it says, at any age, including the old and very old, people are to some extent in charge of and responsible for their own quality of life. They can enjoy positive well-being and experience successful aging. And there's two ways to look at this. One way to look at it is, so yeah, you're responsible. You have to take care of this yourself as you're looking at the person you may be caring for. And but a lot of times our mindset is we take this responsibility. Sometimes we take this away from those we care for. And if we can look at this, that at any age, including the old and very old, people are to some extent in charge of and responsible for, in the capacities that they have, for their own quality of life. So we should really afford them that opportunity. They can enjoy positive well-being and experience successful aging. This really is like the cornerstone of what we do and how we should think about what we do. And of course, this is a whole movement, right? And many of you are very, very familiar with this. This is the Pioneer Network's continuum of person directiveness. And most of us, hopefully, are not on the left side of the chart where, it's provider directed and the provider figures out what's going to happen. This is what time we're going to feed people. This is when they're going to take their baths, Tuesday at 4 o'clock, et cetera, et cetera. That is strictly provider directed care. So the elders accommodate the staff preferences and are expected to follow existing routines. Whereas staff-centered care, it's getting us a little farther along the continuum. And I think at least all of us are at least there, where the staff considers the elders' needs and put themselves in the elders' place while making decisions, but the decisions are still made for the elders. Whereas person-centered care, we ask the elders what they want, and their past preferences if they can't express them to us, and they're part of decision making. So the staff begins to organize routines in order to accommodate the elders' preferences. But that's really not exactly all the way that we can go. We need to get, hopefully many of us right now are at least at person-centered care, where elders make decisions every day about their individual routines, and when not capable of articulating their needs, the staff honors observed preferences and lifelong habits. So the staff organizes themselves around the person-directed care. And then, of course, the ultimate is citizenship, where elders have influence on their community, they're problem solvers, they share responsibility for each other, they're expected to contribute. The organization, leadership, management, and staff support people to exercise autonomy, connection, and well-being, and work to remove systemic barriers. That's the ultimate goal.
So what is happening now? Like, what are folks doing now in wellness?
All right, I'll tell you. Well, first of all, before COVID in 2019, the International Council on Active Aging asked 267 senior living professionals this question: will your community be based in a wellness lifestyle with options for care, Or will it be based in care with wellness offerings by 2023? Well, little do they know, not a lot was going to happen between 2020 and 2023, but 60% of the respondents said their community will be based in a wellness lifestyle. That's a little bit opposite of what we heard today, right? When we did that survey today, it was a 40-60 split, just about, with 60% saying they did not have a formal wellness program. But then they asked the question, similar question in 2022, so just last spring. And they asked 314 folks working in senior living, and they asked them about if wellness has a high or essential priority, and 79% said yes. And I suppose maybe we could have asked that question too, Britt. We could have said to our group today, is wellness a high priority? My guess is that 100% would say yes, because they're here, right? So we self-selected a group that cares about wellness. And also in this 2022 survey, 2/3 of the respondents, 61%, stated that by 2025, the community would be based in a wellness lifestyle with options for care. And what's really interesting is they asked them, well, how do you define these options for wellness? You know, what does wellness programming look like to you? 1, education and lifelong learning. Exercise, both instructor-led and technology-led. Health education and disease management. Food and nutrition education and preparation. And intergenerational programs linking youth and older adults. And I'd like to take a pause here for a second and have you look at this list again and think, where could you in your current role, which of these 5 could you be involved in? And my guess is going to be, you're going to say at least 3, if not all 5.
So how big of a role does dining have in wellness?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Britt, because I had you look at that list, and that list came from the report I told you about. I want to share with you a quote that came from that report. It said, at the end of this whole report about wellness and trends and what's going to happen by 2025, this is what they said. They said, senior living providers can take cues from and form partnerships with hospitality, fitness, dining, and other types of businesses to create and strengthen wellness programs. That made me go, duh, isn't that what we do? So those of you who said yes on this earlier slide, yeah, there's about 3 to 5 of these on this list that I know in my role, I have some kind of a skill set to contribute. There is a huge disconnect in our industry that they think that the recommendation is, hey, look at this list of stuff. We don't have any homegrown skill in here. You're going to have to go out and find some businesses, hospitality businesses. Isn't that what we do? Fitness, dining, and other types of business to create and strengthen wellness. So we've got some work to do. But let's talk about specifically what it would look like in dining, the same dimension of wellness. But let's talk about it. And I'm just going to share with you my thoughts. I'm sure you probably have better thoughts. And if you do, put them in the comment section. We can talk about them at the end. But of course, the physical, we're all over that, right? Medical care, think about reducing the use of therapeutic diets that we do all day long. We promote health through diet. We promote health through food. We nourish people all day long. That's what we do. And I also want to talk about fitness too. Sometimes we don't think of ourselves in fitness, but if you've been to any of my recent webinars where I've talked about malnutrition and sarcopenia and that close connection between the need for nutrition to support any type of physical fitness that people are going through to improve their sarcopenia, which is age-related loss of muscle mass. It's really important that we've got enough protein on board, we got enough calories on board. There's a very close interaction between nutrition and fitness, particularly for the older adults. So we're all over that, and we've got a skill set there. Social wellness, like mealtime. It's a cornerstone of the whole socials of society in our communities. as well as just what the focus of the day is. And we really need to own that and have our communities recognize that and give us the support that we need. And I think we all learned so much from COVID related to that. So, I mean, one word, mealtime. Spiritual, food is connected to life. And it can be a very spiritual experience. And in my experience, wholesome food can be very spiritual. The food preparation can be a spiritual experience. Watching food grow. There's just a wonderful, all major religions have a connection between food and spirituality. So there's a lot of connection there that we can make about what we do and spirituality. Intellectual, from nutrition science to food prep, culinary arts, we have a role in the intellectual component of it. I mean, it was even identified on that earlier slide, nutrition education, food education, vocational wellness. So many of our folks have worked in the food, particularly women. Food preparation was a big part of this generation that we're serving, their lifestyle. And there's so much that we can, so many connections we can make with them about that. Emotion, food is love. Suppose that's not very healthy, right? But it's true. There's such an emotional connection between food and health. And probably more directly, those who eat well have a better emotional life, period. That's research supports that. And then environmental wellness, a lot of what we already talked about, biophilic design, gardens, how we present food, what the dining room look like, kitchen smells, all of it.
So is there any evidence to support that what people eat, and how it affects the aspects of wellness, like what we eat and how it affects us?
Yes, there's some research on that, a ton of it. And I can tell you about one study, it's actually a review of studies, where they try to provide a clear idea of how dietary patterns can improve wellness and how wellness can improve your dietary patterns. So this cause and effect relationship of specific dietary patterns is there for intellectual, vocational, emotional, and physical wellness. So people who eat well do better intellectually, vocationally with their work, their purpose of their day, emotionally and physical. We all know that. I mean, that is common sense. What's interesting, though, is that social and spiritual wellness improves a person's nutritional status. It makes me wonder, all that I said recently about these last few slides about spirituality and food. There's something about that really does promote wellness. And then thus people are in a better nutritional status. People who are in better moods eat better. People who are having a nice dining experience eat better. And people who eat better are more nourished, have a stronger nutritional status, and that pushes them into the wellness sector.
I do have to agree that I am always in a better mood after I eat, and my husband can concur. But so where does a dining program start in creating a wellness program? And how does the community, what does they have to do to have this wellness program in order to promote wellness? So how does that work for a community? I'm sure we have people, participants online that really don't know where to start.
It's a good question. And I really think about this a lot because people ask me about this all the time. And so I boiled it down to these 5 things, at least for now. 1, evolve your thinking. And we'll talk about this. We have to think differently about the people that we serve. We have to think differently about our food. And we have to think differently about our role, who we are. And we'll talk about that. We have to get specific in defining our menu, our menu's role in wellness. And I'm going to show you some very specific things and what our dining department's role is in wellness. And what I like about this is we can do this tomorrow by ourselves. You can be a 1-department wellness team. Now, of course, it's so important that we communicate and coordinate with our community's wellness goals. But if they're not there yet, and it sounds like for 60% of you, that sounds about where they're at, get ready for it because it's coming. And thus, then that's step number 4, provide some leadership. We have skill in this area. When you look at those recommendations, and by the way, that was not from nutrition or a dining group. That was a, active aging. So they're thinking more globally than just food and nutrition. And they missed us in the equation. So we need to step up for ourselves and provide that leadership. And in order to do this, because it is a big part of what we're doing is, in a way, medical nutrition therapy, we need to include the dietitians. Dietitians have great skill sets. We need a culinary team. You need your chefs and your executive chefs and your dining leaders, but you can't do it without a dietitian. And I also want to talk a little bit about the people that we care for, and looking at this slide here. I think sometimes when people think about wellness and older adults, they're thinking about this guy in the pool. And frankly, he's not necessarily the type of person we serve. It's the person in the wheelchair up there in the second picture who we serve. Maybe some of you who have campuses with independent living, certainly you'll have the guy in the pool, and you might even have the pool in your community. But really, the average person we deal with is 85 plus years old, female, and frail. But does that mean that that person doesn't have wellness opportunities? And if we can evolve our thinking around what wellness means and what this person, this woman needs, who's frail and 85, then I think that puts us in a better position to know where to start. Sometimes I hear about big senior living organizations, and they're going to bring in like a celebrity chef, or worse, like a celebrity fitness guru. And I think, boy, this misses the mark. This woman is who we're dealing with and who we need to prepare for and wrap our heads around. And we have got a lot to offer her and enhance her quality of life. So let me show you some more about that, what I'm talking about. So when I say how we need to evolve in terms of an evolution in the way we think, we can't think necessarily about illness and patients and symptoms. And I'm not saying that we abandon all of our clinical abilities, because through food, we can do a lot clinically. We can help those with diabetes and hypertension and all of that, but just not in a super prescriptive way. Not that they're the patient and we're prescribing what they need. We need to think in the context of wellness. And a new concept that for you perhaps, reserve capacity. Reserve capacity means, what does that person have that's going to help them get through the next challenge? And in many cases, for that 85-year-old person, it might be an extra 5 pounds or 10 pounds or 20 or 40 pounds. It might be that extra bit of weight. It might be their ability to take a shower independently. It might be their ability to feed themselves. It might be as simple as their ability to sit up in a chair. So it's, what is their wellness reserve capacity? Because then that translates to positive aging and well-being strategies. Because now we've got the groundwork of where we know where we're starting with, and we know what we're working with. That then allows us to foster autonomy, environmental mastery, which is just a fancy way of saying they can do stuff on their own. For some people, the fact that they can go to the toilet on their own is, the whole life-changing. And think about it. Aren't you glad that you can go to the toilet on the own? And it helps also focus on purpose and a healthy lifestyle, because now the conversation is around that, not about, what are we going to do about your blood sugar and take this medicine? Are you taking the medicine? Are you not taking the medicine, etc. So this is under the concept of positive assessment. So instead of focusing on an older person's weaknesses, oh, you're frail, you're depressed, you don't have any friends, what we think about is, what are your strengths and reserves? What is, again, that functional ability? What health metric is really good? Your blood pressure is a mess, but hey, diabetes, your blood sugar is good. Let's see what we can do. You're independent, you can walk, you've got some friends. Maybe there's some things we can do from a positive perspective to get that blood pressure down. Maybe not so much, cut out all the salt as much as increase the potassium, high potassium foods, etc. So it's looking at it that way, and look at as the person as a whole. So here, and by positive assessment, this literally means clinical assessment. So this context is for people, for practitioners. And so we're borrowing this. So when think about when somebody goes to the doctor, that the doctor is going to talk to them about all 7 pillars of wellness, and not just what their blood pressure is and their weight, but also, hey, who are your friends? What's going on in your social life, in your community, et cetera, because then that's what leads to help a person reach their personal goals. And I love this part, prevent predictable problems. We know what's going to happen to somebody who has a problem with ambulating, getting around. We know that that is a spiral. I've got a whole slide. Any of you ever seen my slide on the cascade of nutritional problems for somebody who doesn't eat well? We know the cascade, the storm that's coming down the pike for somebody who doesn't eat well. They're going to lose weight. They're going to have nutritional deficiencies. They're going to end up not being able to fight off infection. They're going to go to the hospital. But they go to the hospital, they're going to stay there longer. When they come back, they're going to be frail. They're more likely to fall down. It's a whole cycle. And guess what? They don't want to eat when they're in that kind of shape. We know that that's what happens. We can predict. So why don't we prevent it? And why don't we think of prevent it, though, in terms of wellness, rather than this person needs to be on a therapeutic diet for their whatever, diabetes, whatever. What can we do to get them to eat, maintain their weight, be a good eater, be wellness, be well, be independent? All right, so it boils down to, rather than asking what's wrong, ask what's good, what's still working, what is my reserve capacity? The fact that I can take a shower on my own and I'm 90, that's fantastic. And let's build from there. All right.
So Maggie, you made the connection between wellness and dietary patterns earlier. Can you show us what you mean by dietary pattern?
Yes. So now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of some of the things that we can do from a menu perspective when it comes to wellness. And again, it's a mind shift. We're shifting our focus from nutrients to dietary patterns. And by the way, this is a global thing, across the world and across all types of nutrition and health experts. We are now talking in terms of dietary pattern and a more individualized approach. So instead of, every 61-year-old male needs to eat this way, it's people in this age group should have this type of dietary pattern. And this is what I mean. Fruits, vegetables, plant-based proteins and other proteins, low-fat dairy, lean protein, whole grains. These are key foods for health. And there's a body of evidence that shows that, for example, more fruits and vegetables consistently have been identified as characteristics of healthy eating, and whole grains have been identified as well. So, across the board, and this is what we see in the dietary guidelines. So I want to make sure everybody is, anybody on this call who's working with menus, serving food, or has anything to do with thinking about wellness and food, you have to start with the dietary guidelines. This is a 164-page document. It's updated every 5 years. It's an essential resource for health professionals and policymakers. That's the foundation of, like, for example, school lunch patterns and such. It has to do with how we feed people. The dietary guidelines provides information that helps Americans make healthy choices for themselves as well. So there's consumer level information in here, but that's my plate on the right. But on the left, these dietary guidelines translate science into succinct food-based guidance that can be relied on to help Americans choose healthy eating patterns and to help us plan healthy eating. So it's really based on, let's see if this will let me go backwards. Yeah, it's really based on, making sure that there's a pattern of all of these types of foods in a balanced way so that we get all the nutrients and the health benefits. So the science behind the dietary guidelines for adults, including older adults, is that these eating patterns lower risk of all causes of mortality. lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease, lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease mortality. So lower chance of getting the disease of cardiovascular disease and lower chance of dying from cardiovascular disease if you get it. Lower total and LDL cholesterol, lower blood pressure, lower risk of obesity, lower body mass index, waist circumference and body fat, lower risk of type 2 diabetes, lower risk of cancers of the breast, colon and rectum, and favorable health, bone health, including lower risk of hip fracture. What more do you want, right? We have this right now, the ability to promote this through our menus. So here is a snapshot of my diet manual that I use for the menus I write. And I say they're based on the dietary guidelines for 75-year-old males and females. And then these are how many servings of each of these that we serve a day. That's why our interpretive guidelines for those of us who are writing menus and serving menus in nursing homes say that we have to follow some type of a dietary pattern, because when we balance the foods that we're eating, we get the nutrients that we need. But there's more to it, and I'm going to show you that through this example of a dietary pattern. You could use this one. This is the DASH diet, and the DASH diet was really written for lowering blood pressure. But it's another one of these really healthy patterns. It focuses on tons of fruits and vegetables, lean meats, low-fat dairy, et cetera, et cetera. And they found that they studied blood pressure as the outcome, and that people who followed this eating pattern were able to reduce their blood pressure significantly. So it also is a recommended dietary plan for Americans to support an approach to adding healthy foods to the eating plan. That's what I like about the DASH diet, is that it's not about what you take out of the diet, it's about what you put into the diet. And again, tons of information on it. You don't have to figure it out. It's all spelled out for you.
So what else? What about trends such as the Mediterranean diet and Mayan diet?
Those are other eating patterns that people can select from. Mediterranean diet is a little tricky because, unlike the dietary guidelines as an approach or the DASH diet as an approach, Mediterranean diet is defined differently. You have to go into the literature of nutrition researchers who use Mediterranean diets in nutrition research to show the health benefits, to see how they define the Mediterranean diet. So for example, the Mediterranean diet is very low in animal products. It's very close to being a vegetarian diet. You know, the Mediterranean diet, meats and fish are present, but they're more, 1 ounce, 2 ounce portions. The other big thing about Mediterranean diet is that it's olive oil based. So some people don't like the taste of olive oil. Some of us can't afford olive oil in our communities. However, for a certain population, a subpopulation of people who enjoy the fish and the seafood, who really like a plant-forward eating pattern, who you can afford the olive oils, this could be a really nice differentiator for a type of eating pattern that you can make as the foundation of your menu. So it is an approach. And then you mentioned, Britt, the Mayan diet, and it's interesting. The Mayan diet, which was researched here in Chicago, is actually a melding of the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet. And the Mayan diet, the purpose of the Mayan diet was to study whether a healthy eating pattern, again, not whether blueberries helps the brain. I mean, that research is done, but what we're talking about are eating patterns. So will this eating pattern affect cognition for people who have mild to moderate dementia? And will this eating pattern either slow down the advancement of the dementia, or for those with very mild symptoms, will it prevent it from becoming full-blown dementia? And the answer is yes, it works. And they're doing research right now on people with moderate to severe dementia and how that affects how this eating pattern affects the outcome. And this is what it is. Basically, they have 10 what they're calling brain healthy categories of food. It's natural plant-based foods, lower in the saturated fat meats and things like that. Lots of berries, lots of green leafy vegetables every day, and basically olive oil or other vitamin E rich foods. And for us, the way we eat in America, it's pretty much olive oil based. It significantly limits animal-based saturated fats, saturated trans fats, refined grains, and added sugars. So those are the patterns. And my point being, pick one. You know, in order to do a wellness program, you need to have a research-based foundation for your menus. You can't just like start adding blueberries because you hear blueberries. I heard about a study where blueberries are good for you. I mean, blueberries are part of the cornerstone because berries are a big part of the mind diet. But you have to have your foundation. And again, we understand that because we all have menus and recipes. We understand all the components that go into a menu. So choose a plan that will work for your residents. If you're in the middle of Nebraska and nobody wants to eat seafood, I don't know if the Mediterranean diet's the way for you to go. If you're in California, it might be. You might be. I've worked with communities that have been, heavily vegetarian because that's what that community wants. So choose a plan that will work for those that you're taking care of. But also you have to choose a plan that's going to work for you. Can you afford it? And do you have the resources to pull it off? I can tell you this much, you have the resources to pull off the dietary guidelines. I know you can do that. So we all can do that. And so, and you could probably do DASH diet too. It's basic food. So that's a good place to start if you need to. And don't forget, there's tons of resources. There's all kinds of patient and client education that already exists in the dietary guidelines. Dietary guidelines even has an app, and with DASH as well. And so here's some recommendations on how to get from your standard senior living menu to what would be considered a wellness menu. First and foremost, pick your pattern, pick your basic patterns. So you can see why you need to have a dietitian involved in this. And by the way, even if you're in an assisted living or an independent living community in a state that does not require you to have a dietitian, these are health related changes you're making in a menu. My suggestion is you have to have a dietitian because of licensure. You want, is it inside the scope of a non-licensed dietitian to be working along these lines to develop a program for an entire community? And in my opinion, no, you need to have a dietitian, not to mention it's more efficient that way anyway. So what are you doing already that fits into your parameters, and how can it be featured? I can tell you right now, oatmeal. Are you running like oatmeal, farina, cream of rice? I don't know if anybody's doing cream of rice anymore, but I mean, if you're serving oatmeal and farina, how much do they like farina? Farina's the white bread of hot cereal. We don't need to be serving farina. And it's salty because you have to put a little bit of salt in it because it doesn't taste like anything. Why don't we serve oatmeal and figure out another way to do oats, or a breakfast quinoa, or you get what I'm saying. Start with what you've got. You're all serving oatmeal. Make a big deal about your oatmeal, make your oatmeal delicious, and get everybody having that instead of, the frosted flakes. So you know what I mean about that. Add simple, accessible foods such as fruits and vegetables and legumes. We can afford all of that. Can we do a little bit more on the fresh instead of frozen in the vegetable category? Because that goes a long way. Or is there a way to prepare our vegetables that really enhances the beauty? Remember that whole spiritual thing we talked about with food. This is the foundation of that. These wholesome, whole foods prepared. And it can be very simple, but prepared in a way that that's, now that I'm thinking about it out loud, that's the other spiritual aspect of this, right? It's the people who are preparing the food as well. And that can also help your culture in your kitchens as well. Who doesn't want to be involved in that? Put time into your menus that are going to have impact. So you are going to have to make some wellness changes, but make sure that these are items that really have impact and that are going to be important and valuable to your residents. So there's going to have to be some communication going along there. Tweak your preparation methods. You might have some recipes that are okay, but maybe the way you prepare it, or probably more likely, the ingredient that you're purchasing is it can be tweaked and be healthier. Select healthier ingredients. Start looking at what's in your ingredients. How much protein really is in that chicken breast per ounce? How much? And some of you might be saying, well, it's all protein, isn't it? Well, no. A lot of the meats that we're buying now are injected with sodium phosphates and things like that help make it tender and make it easy for us to have lots of different skill sets preparing it, but that costs us some nutrition. So take a look at your ingredients and what you're really buying and what you're really serving, and have have some have voice there in terms of pushing back with your suppliers and manufacturers about products that you really need in order to do this wellness trend. And I think there's going to be a wave of us speaking about, really how healthy is the food that we're serving. And in this age of transparency, we're going to have to know that information, because our customers and their families are going to want to know. And use the menu instructively. That's part of all that health education on that slide of those 5 things. We can use the menu instructively, not like the food police, but instructively. And so it boils down to focusing on person-centered care, promoting the increase in consumption of healthy foods, empowering the residents through education, have us as an organization be the facilitator to this and not necessarily the food police, involve interdisciplinary programming to support residents from various but coordinated fronts. And how much support material do you want to develop, and how much do you want to just pick up off of some of these nice standardized programs like dietary guidelines, and also have our wellness program through dining focus on other factors besides diet or nutrition, such as exercise, tobacco use, stress reduction, and that almighty socialization. All right, so where do we start? You asked a question, I'm going to finally answer it, Britt. We evolve our thinking. We define our dining's menu and whatever else our role in wellness is going to be from a dining perspective. Coordinate with the community's wellness goals. Now we need to go outside ourselves a little bit, but then we can provide that leadership and include our dietitians. And I just want to one more time, let's see if I can find that quote. Is it here? I just wanted to leave you with remembering that by promoting wellness, we focus on enhancing and extending our residents' lives rather than primarily caring for their health conditions. We want to make the invisible visible. Once a clear vision and educational foundation have been established, your community can put a concentrated public relations effort in place to further change perception. The goal is to give voice to residents and their families, as older people often aren't heard or seen in making efforts. And too often, when they are seen, they're mostly viewed through a lens of diminished capacity, ill health, and a burden to the family. So it's important that we change our focus on the wellness of each individual that we're serving.
Wow, Maggie, that was great. You are clearly very passionate about that. And it's awesome. And we do have a couple questions for you. So I just want to make sure that we get those asked while we still have everybody on. The first one is the menu guidelines what a surveyor looks for during state inspection?
Ask the question again.
Is the menu guidelines what a surveyor looks for during state inspection?
The surveyor is going to look to see, now when I mentioned the interpretive guidelines, yes, there's a section in the interpretive guidelines that talks about what your menu has to be based on. If you look at the regs just say it has to be based on a CMS regs, it has to be based on a dietary pattern. Like I'm in Illinois, and Illinois has specific regulations where they say in the regulation, your menu has to have 6 servings of edible portion of meat, 2 servings of milk, blah, blah, blah. But the federal regulations don't say that. They just say have to be planned by a dietitian and have on a dietary pattern. And then in the interpretive guidelines, they talk about, yeah, you can pick a pattern. So you can say ours is based on, but it's got to be based on some evidence-based healthy eating pattern that says, well, the other piece of it is you have to meet 100% of the dietary reference intakes for, which used to be the RDIs, now they're the DRIs, for that age group. So 90 milligrams of vitamin C a day, etc. So you have to have a pattern in order to pull that off. And they say you have to have an established pattern, and you can pick whatever one you want, but it has to be some type of an established pattern. I picked the dietary guidelines. So you're not required to use the dietary guidelines, but that's the one I picked. I hope that answers the question.
Got it. So the next question is, should the wellness menu be a separate diet like other therapeutic diets so the doctor can order it?
That's interesting, but no, because that's prescriptive. Now we're back to the old school prescriptive. Now, I'm not saying there's no room for therapeutic diets, and in some settings there may be if a person self-selects that. But for our typical 85-year-old, who, from my perspective, my biggest concern is they're not going to eat well. We give them a less restrictive diet, but I don't mean unrestricted, and I don't mean like the Wild West. Like if they're at home, they're probably not eating biscuits and gravy that they're preparing for themselves and then ham for lunch. And, you know, you get where I'm going with this. So we do have an obligation to provide them with wholesome, nutritious, healthy foods. And we can do that through this wellness pattern, but let's not medicalize it and have it prescribed.
Okay, so then people with diabetes and other health conditions, do we still serve the therapeutic diets to them?
Well, actually, we shouldn't be serving that to them with or without wellness. If you look at the now 10-year-old new dining practice standards that say that restrictive therapeutic diets are not appropriate for, again, the frail older adult. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has a position paper on this because of that risk. And this is how the Academy says it. The benefit of that therapeutic diet has to outweigh the risk of the person not eating well. So it's all about which was why I kind of asked that first question. It's all about keeping their nutrition intact with calories so they don't lose weight. But we can do a good job of also making sure not only is there a lot of calories in there, but it's a healthy eating pattern to promote all those. Remember that whole list of all those diseases I talked about. You know, if they eat well and they follow the dietary patterns, they probably don't need a diabetic diet.
Right. So this next question is a two-parter. Is protein really that important? And what foods should we avoid? And I think I know the answer to the last one, but I'm going to let you answer.
Okay. Is protein really that important? Absolutely, positively, yes. As a matter of fact, right now, the recommendation for older adults is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And there's lots of talk, and I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen, if it does not happen soon, is of changing that from 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Tons of evidence to say older folks need protein. The problem is, if you eat a lot of protein, but you don't get enough calories, though that protein that you eat is going to be converted to calorie energy, because you got to make your brain work first. That gets the priority. Your muscles, getting out of the chair is your second priority. Your first priority is that your brain works. And so that will be used for fuel instead of, you know, muscle and strength. What was the second part of the question?
What food should we avoid?
I don't know that I would say that there are foods we should avoid necessarily, but the classic dietitian answer is there's no such thing as a bad food. And I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I think that I truly believe, and I know from the evidence supports in the very powerful healing benefit of food. 85-year-olds can only eat so much food. So every spoonful counts. Now, I'm not saying don't ever give them, a biscuit or ham, but, and I do understand that what we serve these people is literally what they're going to eat for the rest of their lives. So we have a big responsibility there, but I think we also have an opportunity to promote that wellness in a way that, and prepare the food in a way that makes it desirable to them. And that we use some of these other foods that aren't very healthy as and have negative impact on their health outcomes, and use those more in a celebratory way or in a special way than being the cornerstone of the diet.
Got it. Okay. Does anyone else have any additional questions while we still have Maggie here? I think we still got a couple minutes. Okay.
That was fun. Thanks for
That was
inviting.
great.
Oh, I should, oh, wait, oh, we have to say the important thing. You're gonna get your CEUs on Monday. Look in your email box for an email from rd@roachdietitians.com. Check your spam folder before you come yelling at me. But I'll help you out if you can't find it, but it should be in your inbox. And you can be my friend if you'd like. Come and see me on LinkedIn and let's connect. If you got a question, I'm happy to answer it. And let's look for each other out and about in the real world. Britt, thank you very much.
Maggie, thank you. That was awesome. And so just a quick reminder to our listeners that Maggie's company frequently consults and provides training to companies across the country. So her contact info is up there. Please reach out to her for assistance in setting up or improving your wellness and dining program. She really is the expert. Thank you for joining us. This presentation has been sponsored by Belter Companies. No one knows food service like we know food service. From design, renovations, kitchen equipment, tabletop and smallwares. Let's pursue your passion. Contact us today. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.